seed word and new world order or changing world order. Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a great week last week. I hope this week will be fantastic. There is no list of 12 seed words in this episode because last week's 21 questions with TC featured a cashew QR code. Congratulations to the person who swiped the 2100 sats. This Wednesday, TC's full interview will be out. That will include seed words, and I'll have one seed word somewhere in this interview, so pay close attention. It'll come in handy when TC's full episode drops. And the theme is Bitcoin is bacon. If you know, you know. So I would say a few years ago, if anyone spoke of a world order or a new world order, they were considered to be absolutely crazy. And it would seem that that is no longer the case. Ray Dalio came out with a tweet, a monster tweet. I'm just going to pull it up here. So far, it has 53 million views, 62,000 likes, and of course, it's been bookmarked a bunch of times. And in this article, he says it's official. The world order has broken down. At the Munich Security Conference, the post 1945 world order was pronounced dead by most leaders, and the picture behind it was laid out in the Security Report 2026 entitled Under Destruction, which you can read here if you're interested. More specifically, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said the world order as it has stood for decades no longer exists, and that we are in a period of great power politics. He made clear that freedom is no longer given in this new era. French President Emmanuel Macron echoed Merz's assessment and said that Europe's old security structures tied to the previous world order don't exist, and Europe must prepare for war. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that we are in a new geopolitics era because the old world is gone. This article is really good. It echoes the book that Ray Dalio released, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago, Changing World Order, and he talks about the different cycles that happen. I'm just going to read the 5 major kinds of fights between countries that Dalio identifies. Number 1 is trade/economic wars, conflicts over tariffs. We've seen that. Check. Import-export restrictions and other ways of damaging a rival economy. 2, technological wars, conflicts over which technologies are shared and which are held as protected aspects of national security. Check. I think that if you consider, all of this stuff about stockpiling strategic materials and stuff, the stuff we're seeing with chips, the battle between the US and China, I think that would fit into this category. Number 3, geopolitical wars, conflicts over territory and alliances that are resolved through negotiations and explicit or implicit commitments, not fighting. So does Greenland fit into this category? Does what's happening between China and Taiwan fit into this category? But check, I would say that we're seeing that. Number 4, capital wars, conflicts imposed through financial tools such as sanctions. Check, we've seen those, e.g., cutting off money and credit by punishing institutions and governments that offer it, and limiting foreign access to capital markets. I think that, Iran has long been sanctioned. I'm not arguing whether it's right or wrong. I'm just stating a fact. We saw Russia was cut off the SWIFT system. And then number 5, military wars, conflicts that involved actual shooting and the deployment of military forces. Check. We've seen that obviously in Russia versus NATO/Ukraine, and obviously in Palestine and in other regions of the world. So I think there's evidence to show that all 5 of these things are happening right before our eyes. And if you read the rest of the article, you'll see how Ray Dalio develops his argument about this, the world order that we've known breaking down. And it's funny because against this backdrop, we see that the EU, specifically the ECB, is moving ahead with its plans to launch a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, on the 12th. So I should say that Dalio came out with this article on the 14th of February. How beautiful and fitting for Valentine's Day. On the 12th of February, the European Central Bank posted, Europe cannot take its monetary sovereignty for granted. Amid political tensions and rapid technological change, reducing dependencies in payment and finance is vital for resilience and competitiveness, says Executive Board member Piero Cipollone. And it's kind of funny to read this because Europe has long overregulated, especially the tech industry. And I think that's one of the reasons it's so far behind in terms of payment infrastructures. While the relationship was good with the US, it was okay to rely on MasterCard and Visa. And because I guess, these leaders have seen the deterioration of the current world order for some time, they've been slowly trying to build payment alternatives in this instance. And I think also with the Genius Act, I've talked about this, I've had guests talk about this on the podcast previously. The boom of stablecoins, specifically USDT Tether, the fact that they are buying American debt to help back their stablecoins, it poses a huge threat to the euro's sovereignty. And I say that in exclamation marks because on the one hand, Europe is fighting for its sovereignty relative to other countries like the US, like China, like Russia. But on the other hand, Europe is making moves to restrict the sovereignty of individuals because with the central bank digital currency, you cannot interact or transact in a sovereign way because the European Central Bank will have a say on what you can and cannot buy. And so it's to me quite ironic that on the one hand, this bloc called the euro is fighting for its financial sovereignty, and on the other hand, in doing so, it will and it is restricting citizens. Well, in Holland, perfect, segue. They have started or they have decided to impose a tax of 36% on unrealized gains. This proposal has just passed the House of Representatives. And when you think about that, that's insane. If your Bitcoin, appreciates in value and on the date, let's say it's December 31st, you see that the fiat equivalent of your Bitcoin has doubled, for example, you need to pay 36% on those unrealized gains. And because those gains are not realized, you have to take money out of your pocket, out of your income, out of your salary, out of your cash flow to cover those costs. To me, that just screams, a country, a region that is doing its best to limit people's exposure, limit people's ability to use Bitcoin, something that will help them maintain their sovereignty during this time of change where we see the world order changing. Bitcoin News did a pretty good breakdown of what that 36% unrealized gains tax would look like. And in the detailed example they have, I will share the link to this tweet so you can take a look yourself. It says, step one, starting position, you own 500 shares. Value on January 1st, 2028 is 50,000 euros. Value on January 1st, 2029 is 100,000 euros. So your paper gain, this is the unrealized gain because you haven't actually sold those shares, is 100,000 minus 50,000 is 50,000 euros. You do not sell, but for tax purposes, that 50,000 euros is treated as income. Step two, apply exemption. You're married, so you get a 3,600 euro exemption. 50,000 minus 36,000 is 46,400 taxable amount. Tax rate 36%. 46,400 times 36% is 16,704 euros. That is your tax bill. That tax bill is due in May, even though you never sold anything. Step three, market falls before you pay. Now, suppose by May, the shares drop in value. New total value is 60,000 euros. That doesn't matter. Your portfolio is not even worth 100,000, but you're still paying taxes on that 100,000 even though the current value is 60,000. And the tax bill remains 16,704. So, step 4, you must sell shares to pay tax to raise 16,704. You sell part of your shares after paying the tax, you're left with 60,000 minus 16,704. You're left with 43,296 euros. Originally, you had 500 shares. Now you have 360 shares left. You were forced to sell 140 shares. 140 divided by 500 equals 28% of your shares gone. Step 5, what happened economically? Before the correction, paper gain was 50,000 euros. After correction, portfolio was worth 60,000 euros. Original cost basis was 50,000 euros. Real gain is only 10,000 euros. You paid 16,704 euros in tax. So instead of being up 10 grand, you are now 6,704 euros below your original starting value. You turned a 10,000 euro real gain into 6,400 and 4 euro net loss. And you lost 28% of your shares permanently. I mean, this is just, I'll leave the link so you can go through the math yourself. But if this does not discourage investings in companies, I don't know, what will. And the last thing I wanted to share, the Kobayashi letter, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, tweeted again on the 12th of February. Everything happened closer to the end of the week. Breaking, Russia is considering moving back to the US dollar as part of a wide ranging economic partnership with President Trump, per Bloomberg. The partnership would include US and Russia working together on fossil fuels, joint investments in natural gas, offshore oil and critical raw material partnerships, windfall for US companies, Russia's return to the USD settlement system. If finalized, this deal would change the global economy. Most definitely. If you are based in Malaysia or Singapore or India or China or, any Asian country, I would love for you to share your perspective on whether even, the world order has changed or is changing. What kind of news is coming out of those regions with respect to global or geopolitical dynamics? I would love to know. And hopefully, you watched this whole thing through. You would have, or you may see, the seed word for Wednesday's interview. Don't forget, you can win 21,000 sats if you are the first to find all 12 seed words and sweep the wallet. And yeah, thank you. Have a great week and tell me what you think in the comments. Bye.